Ready to call to order the January 19th City of Port Orchard Council Work Study Session. Please join me in the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item on our agenda is the Kitsap County Comprehensive Plan. And we have Commissioner Garrido here with us this evening. Do you have some other guests who would like to join us at the table?
I wanted to sit there, I think, until we were formally invited up.
Come on up.
Thank you for inviting us. I understand that there are some concerns about the UGA lines and some of the reasons they are where they are. And so I brought up some staff that will help answer any technical questions you have, and I want to make sure that I heard the conversation and participate, make sure that we have some policy level agreements going forward. So I'd like to introduce you to Jeff Rowe, who is the acting director for UCD, Katrina Knudsen, and David Gleatham.
Good evening.
There's some microphones here. If you speak loudly and there's some microphones, or if you want.
Okay.
Who's going to be speaking?
Jeff Rowe is the acting director of Development Community Development for the county. And with him are Katrina Knudsen and David Gleatham, who are excellent planners, and they brought lots of information, and they will be able to answer your technical questions.
How would we like to start this? Got the maps.
Did you bring a presentation? Or are you just going to answer questions?
Primarily to answer questions.
If there's a different way that you'd like it, I mean, they could do a presentation, but I think it probably makes most sense just to understand where your concerns are.
And we're also happy to give a brief overview of where we're at in the county's process, what the next steps
Start,
are.
I guess, backing up, I guess, a month ago, 6 weeks ago, Beck and I met with Commissioner Garrido, and then that's why we're here this evening. Probably 30 days prior to that, what the council, as a council body, I was a council member at that time, received the maps, and we were all kind of taken aback how we got to this point, and we had some concerns, wrote a letter, probably to your, somewhere in your office, that we weren't too happy with the where we were at and how we'd gotten here, and we reached out to Commissioner Garrido, and then we agreed to have this meeting here this evening. So,
A quick overview then of where we're at in our timeline and what the next steps are. So your letter was in response to the release of our draft comprehensive plan documents, the environmental impact statement, the draft goals and policies, and the draft land use alternatives out of the main topic of, I think, your questions. That was the first 30-day public comment period. We wanted to use the State Environmental Policy Act to get that out early, get some feedback while we still had 3 alternatives to work with. Since that time, we've reviewed city comments, tribe, agency comments, and public comments, and we're working with the Board of Commissioners to winnow down the 3, which is the no action, well, if we accommodate growth with no changes to the most extreme, to one preferred alternative that we'll then use to draft our final comprehensive plan documents for release likely at the beginning of April. So this is part of that feedback to help us work with the board to get a preferred that we can work that draft, that final plan around. The next steps are as follows. We've been work studying with the board, mentioning to the other members we'd be meeting with you. We've met with the City of Bremerton recently. This Friday, we plan on releasing a staff recommended preferred draft for the public to review and comment on. And then the board is going to hold 3 public hearings, one in North, Central, and South in the first week of February. So there will be a meeting February 1st at Paulsville City Council Chambers for the North End, in Silverdale at the CK Water District February 2nd, and for South Kitsap February 8th up in the Commissioner's Chambers, the regular business meeting time of 5:30 p.m. on Monday the 8th, and any of those hearings are available for public input. They're just to give a variety of locations. After those 3 hearings, the board will provide direction to staff on a preferred alternative that we can then formulate the final plan around as we try to finish up the draft for the final legislative process. So you're in that process and timeline right now, and we've met with Commissioner Garrido, who shared your concerns and comments, and we've seen your letter. We've also reviewed your staff report for the evening, and ready to answer questions. Katrina is our technical expert on the numbers. Most of you met Katrina when we were here last year, I think in June, to talk about the numbers in the Balancing Act we're working on with the city. And we want to continue that dialogue. So that's a little bit of the background of where we're at in the process.
So recapping, end of this week, the staff
End of this,
recommended.
yep, and we'll send out a notice if you've signed up for our comp plan notices. We'll post it on our website, and what that is at least one plan to look at and comment on in this winnowing process. It doesn't mean that's what the board's going to select. It's something to look at that's a staff recommendation to move forward with those 3 hearings to gather input on.
Will that be kind of a modification of all 3 of these?
Yes, indeed. It'll be a mix and match. Our general direction from the board as we started this process was limit UGA expansion to the extent feasible, urban growth area expansion. So that's been a key driver in this process. You're absolutely right. It'll be a mix and match of several different alternatives.
And hopefully tonight's discussion will be valuable.
Part of that.
Absolutely.
And even though we're having these in the 3 districts, if you will, they're not centric. The presentations or the information we're looking for from those meetings will be open to any of the plans and how they affect the different areas.
I have a couple of questions. My first question is, alternatives 2 and 3 reduce Port Orchard UGA, and then it significantly changes the densities of properties that are currently in our UGA that would be removed from our UGA. And as an example for the audience, you could have a property, and let's use Phillips Road as an example. You could have a property on Phillips Road right now, and it's in our UGA, and the zoning is 4 to 9 or 5 to 9 dwelling units per acre. And under the alternatives 2 and 3, some of those parcels would come out of our UGA, and they would go to a designation of 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres. So my question is, have you done any evaluation of the change in economic value of those properties?
We actually did a study for your department, your planning department, about a year ago that looked at, there was a map given to us a little over a year ago of potential reduction areas. And we actually did the analysis for the city on retail value, taxable value, and monies that would be associated with infrastructure improvements. So the sewer, water, what it would cost, so what the city would gain, and then what would then be infrastructure cost to the city. So that was done over a year ago.
Okay, well, my question was specific parcels of property. So there is an evaluation that was done of the change of the economic value if a property has been in the UGA and then out of the UGA. Another example or another question is these properties, and let's just look at the properties south on Bethel from Fred Meyer down to Leiter, and those would be removed from mixed use and would go again to a 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres. There are many non-conforming or parcels in there that are not 5 acres. So what happens to them in the future if they wanted to sell? Or if a commercial business that was there now, and as it's zoned mixed use, say they wanted to expand, and it's now can they expand? Can they buy their neighboring property and actually expand their business?
So in each of our alternatives that reduce the UGA down Bethel, we looked at we went parcel by parcel and looking at the businesses that were there. So in both alternatives 2 and 3, you're correct, it is taken out, removed from the urban growth area. The residential parcels would go to rural residential, which is 1 unit per 5. The existing businesses along that corridor have either been assigned a rural commercial or a rural industrial zoning that would make them legally conforming.
But could they expand?
They could expand under the use table allowed in those zones.
Expand to a neighboring parcel that's zoned residential.
No.
So they couldn't expand if their property couldn't accommodate it, existing property.
Correct, unless they came in for a site-specific rezone, which would be allowed through our docket periodically.
I might add that we had a meeting with, some of the folks are here tonight, with the group of landowners from Bethel Road about 2 weeks ago. And since that meeting have been considering the comments we received, and the draft that we'll produce likely this Friday does take a look at bringing some of Bethel back in. We know we won't satisfy everybody with the initial draft, but that's okay, it's out there for comment. And so we've had a good discussion with some of the landowners in Bethel recently, just to keep you up to date on where we're at with that.
You know, going back to that just a little bit, say it's not commercial, but I have a friend that owns a couple of rentals out there, and they may even be manufactured homes, I'm not sure, but they don't sit on 5 acres. You know, what can they do with that property if it's now 1 to 5? You know, what can they do with that moving forward?
We could pull up the use table if you have there's a number of uses that are allowed on rural residential. I mean, a residential setting on a larger lot is a primary use that's permitted within that zone. There are a couple of other accessory uses. We can look those up.
But they wouldn't have any problem selling those. Say it's an acre lot. Would they have any problem selling an acre lot when it's a 1 to 5 zone?
No, so there's a lot of places within the county that have lots that were subdivided pre-growth management, and they would be able to sell, if their lot is an acre, they could sell it as an acre and develop on that acre. So we wouldn't force them to aggregate to 5 acres. They could develop on, we have 1/4 acre lots in rural residential, and they're able to be permitted on that.
The zoning code calls out historic lots of record or legacy lots to recognize that circumstance.
I'll just add, as to the uses in rural residential, it's really limited what you can do beyond residential uses. So there are a couple of isolated examples that you can apply for permits to be able to do some other commercial activity on that, but it's pretty limited. And it really, the use table, the zoning use table lends itself to keeping rural residential in a rural character kind of format. So it's pretty limited.
Thank you. Other comments?
I'm kind of missing the motivation that the city needs to want to reduce our area. I mean, I'm not seeing why we would want to, because when we looked at the original maps and the alternatives, you know, we said maybe this area, maybe this area, but it sounded almost like, you know, the genie's out of the bottle, that it's been UGA, and we don't, I mean, why should we be motivated to give up portions of our UGA? I mean, that's what the concept that I'm missing.
Your staff did a wonderful job putting together the full picture of the issue in here. I mean, I don't know if Nick
Or maybe
did
you
that.
can explain it to me.
You did a really great job, whoever wrote this, to really show the issue. So your staff did a really great job putting this together, and just, I guess, a brief history in time. We became part of the Puget Sound Regional Council, the county and its cities as a whole. By doing that through the regional transportation, or an RTPO, in order to get federal transportation funding, our electeds all signed on to what is known as Vision 2040, as well as the regional growth strategy. And I have all of that information. So through that process, they give each of the counties and the cities that are located within them a percentage of growth. So they break out, it's all of Snohomish, King, Pierce, and Kitsap. And as you know, we're the smallest of those fish in that sea. So regionally, over this planning period, Kitsap County, of the total population growth, we're only allotted 9% of that from everyone else, and 5% of the total employment growth for the whole region. So that's not a whole lot. This was developed after our initial comprehensive plans when the original urban growth areas were sized. So let's just take population, for instance. So if you look at, of the 9% total regional, 26% of that off the top goes to our one metro city, which is Bremerton. And these are all within the regional growth strategy. They're not really up for debate. It's, if you want federal transportation dollars, you will plan this way. The core city, which is Silverdale, which is not a city, but unincorporated area, gets 13%. The large city, which is Bainbridge Island in Kitsap County, gets 11%. Port Orchard falls under the small city category, which gets 8%. Now, both Paulsbo and Port Orchard are within the small city category. So Paulsbo and Port Orchard have to split 8% of the total population growth. The unincorporated urban growth areas get 26%, and the rural area is allocated 16%. For employment, the picture gets a little more bleak for some of us. So we get 5% of the total, which was 4% before the county and some of the cities went over to Puget Sound Regional Council and said, hey, if you're really serious about the job housing balance, we need to have more jobs over here where our people are, or they're going to continue to migrate out of county for jobs in Seattle or Tacoma. So we were able to get that up 1%, which we hope to get up a little bit more in Vision 2050 update. But Bremerton off the top gets 22% of the jobs for our region. Silverdale gets 23%, Bainbridge gets 8%, and then Port Orchard and Paulsbo again are in the small city category, which have to split 13% of the total job allocation. And rural gets 7%. So going into the regional growth strategy under Vision 2040, we all knew that there was going to be some planning that would have to happen in order for us to be consistent with this. So this is the first time in our 2016 comp plan updates where we're not only going to have to be consistent with the Growth Management Act and go through our Department of Commerce checklist for our comp plans and our development regulations, but we're also going to have to abide by the Vision 2040 regional growth strategy checklist. And if we are not certified, then we do not get federal transportation dollars, which is a pretty significant hit to the county. So it's not necessarily a motivation, it's a requirement that we have to meet in order for our plans to be certified. These numbers are all broken down into the countywide planning policies in Appendix B and C. We have our population targets and our employment targets. So from there, we had to break down those numbers into both sectors of commercial industrial jobs, each of the geographies, looking what is existing on the ground. In Port Orchard, it gets a little bit more tricky because at the time that this was adopted, there were two separate urban growth areas for Port Orchard. There was the Port Orchard urban growth area, and there was the McCormick ULID 6 urban growth area. When the city annexed McCormick Woods into its city boundaries, you not only took into your city the people that live there and work there now, but you also took the demand or the jobs and the people that were projected to go there. Specifically within McCormick Woods, there is and we have the maps and analysis we've provided, but significant population capacity, which then puts the Port Orchard UGA in a unique position because the city now has more capacity in it than it did previously because of the absorption of McCormick Woods. This issue was identified and discussed with the city during 2012, our remand order. We placed policies of UGAMA and and basically exactly what we're doing through this comprehensive plan process. At that time, I think we were about 2,000 people over capacity in the urban growth area, and we put the policy in our comprehensive plan in order to, both to know what we had to do in 2016, but also for some of the reasons we were appealed. So policy land use 15 in our comp plan, which we've discussed with you previously, resolve the oversizing of Eula and McCormick UGA before allocating new population to the South Kitsap area. So knowing that that was going on and all the numbers that your staff have looked at in here, our urban growth area in the no action alternative is 219% over employment capacity and right around 70% over population capacity. The city itself is also over in both population and employment. We were taken to the growth board in 2012 and had to reduce our urban growth areas by a third during that process. And there's a similar overage of capacity and demand here that we faced in all of the rest of the urban growth areas in 2012. So as far as the county is concerned, it's not necessarily an option because the city has adequate and in excess capacity for population and employment within your boundaries. So I know that's a long, complicated answer to your question, but it really is something that we've studied quite a lot, and it really is the regional growth strategy at work.
Can I go back to some comments you made? I have questions about the employment numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And when we look at the employment numbers, existing employment in Port Orchard or in any of the areas, what employment is that? And what my question is, if you have something like Kitsap Bank, or Kitsap County, which have their main offices within our city, do we count all of your employees or just your employees that work out of the city? And same with Kitsap Bank. Do we count all of their employees, their entire branch network, because their main office is here, or do we count just the employees they have within our city?
So for Kitsap Bank, for instance, they're broken up into branches, and so they would be within that sub-geography, Bremerton, Silverdale, whichever. The majority of county employees are located within, obviously, your city. There are some roadsheds that have jobs associated with them, and that's how they're sparsed out.
Okay, so like our school district, I believe that their administrative offices are out of the city, but they have schools within the city. So our numbers would just be the employment centers that are within our city.
Within the city, correct.
Okay. Now you had said, I believe, with your employment allocations that you had to do, that we shared 13% growth with Poulsbo because we were the two small cities?
Correct.
When we look at alternatives 2 and alternatives 3, and we look at the employment allocation of those, when we look at 1, including the urban growth areas, Port Orchard needed to take on 4,214 more jobs, and Poulsbo 4,152. So very, very close numbers. When we look at alternatives 2 and 3, those numbers become skewed in that under alternative 2, Port Orchard and the UGA, our growth would go up to over 7,000 or an increase at 2,800. And on alternative 3, it would go up 2,600, and yet Poulsbo's remains the same. So this 13% has become something other than 13%. Can you explain that?
Well, I'd have to look at exactly what you're looking at here. Just so that everyone here knows, we received a letter from the city of Poulsbo. Their supply and their demand were within 1.5% of each other, and therefore they chose not to go through a joint planning process this time. We will be updating the Poulsbo UGA sub-area plan with them through the next round. I think what we're looking at here, so if we're looking at
I think this is 2 and this is 3.
So there's documents that are of this size. I mean, if we can take a break and I can actually look at this, you know, I've had a lot of material that's been prepared here. I don't know everything off the top of my head. So if we can maybe take a break and come back to that after other questions are asked.
That's fine. And you can answer it to me offline. That's fine. I just, when you explained that 13%, I was a little familiar with these numbers, so I.
So Katrina, understanding that it wasn't a matter if, but that we needed to look at our boundary adjustment, would you like to explain how the county went through its decision-making processes to choose these areas that are represented as A through G in this map?
Sure.
Alternative 2.
So when we started looking at this, the city of Port Orchard, or the Port Orchard urban growth area, we really took our advice on maps that were given to us from the city back in 2014. During that time, there was areas A through K of consideration for reduction because previous to that, we had been in discussions with both staff and at the council level about some of the issues that we were noticing were surfacing through the buildable lands report process and also the employment and population targeting. We took that map as a start of where we wanted to look. So we took each of the city proposed A through K or A through L areas. We analyzed them in terms of existing and proposed development. We looked at infrastructure. We looked at critical areas. It's really the trifecta of what we look at when we're either going to expand or reduce an urban growth area. What is its existing lot pattern? Is it more urban versus rural? So that's number one of what we look at. Number two, where's infrastructure, sewer, services, are roads located nearby, are gas lines nearby? That's the second thing we look at. And then the third is the abundance or lack thereof of critical areas. Knowing that Growth Management Act's tenants are, densifying within a core, an area that was already developed at an urban lot pattern would be more attractive to be within an urban growth area. An area that's closer to existing sewer where a city or a county has put infrastructure money in would be more attractive. And then we try to stay away to the maximum extent we can large areas of critical areas, which there are some areas within the existing urban growth area that have an abundance of those. So our analysis started there from the map that was given to us from the city. From there, we went through our first round of open houses and outreach. Through the first round of public comments, we received over 4,000 unique comments on our plan, our alternatives, and the capital facility plan that furthered the maps that you're seeing before you today. We also had a number of reclassification requests, some of which were located within the urban growth area. There were 2 or 3 that are within the Phillips Road area that were recommending or wanting to come out of the urban growth area. So that was a logical area for us to look at those land use patterns. So that's kind of where it started. Public testimony has been pretty hot and heavy within this south area. A lot of folks wanting to come out of the urban growth area for farming reasons, critical area reasons, taxation reasons. The list goes on and on. Most of them are within the Phillips Road area that we'll talk about. But some of the areas that we had to look at were based on just the sheer number of what we had to achieve to get to regional growth strategy. So as I mentioned, the UGA employment-wise or the city and the county together, we were 219% over employment capacity within the city and the urban growth area. Knowing that the city cannot unannex or give back properties, or that, I guess you can technically, but nobody would probably want to do that. We looked at large swath areas that have been in the urban growth area for a significant amount of time that either do not have the infrastructure still after 12 years, which we've received a number of comment letters that regarding sewering our urban growth areas, and there's a statute that the county has to abide by. When we designate urban areas, we have to have them sewered within a certain number of years. So the county, we're also on the hook in that nature. So we looked at those areas, but we really started with the Phillips Road area, knowing that that was our most commented area. And so you'll notice that between alternative 2 and alternative 3, that's a little bit different in the amount that we've reduced. We wanted to give our board of county commissioners some wiggle room in looking at this. So you'll notice that between alternative 2 and alternative 3, there's a little bit more land down to the south in Phillips Inn versus up near Baby Doll Road. And that was, based on public testimony. We wanted to give the board some choice and the public some commenting choice. You'll notice in both of these areas that Bethel is completely out just south of the Fred Meyer there. We'll take this opportunity to let you all know that the county intends to remove its mixed-use zone from our zoning code entirely, and instead focus mixed use as a use in the use table to make redevelopment code actually happen in other areas of our county. It's similar to our senior living homestead zone. We believe that senior living should be allowed in all of our urban areas and not just in one specific zone. So we're really looking at consolidating our use table to make it more dependable for our both development community and our staff. Through the process of the draft going out, we did receive significant testimony from the Phillips Road folks, but we also heard significant testimony from the Bethel Road folks saying, hey, don't take us out, we want to stay in. So staff, we went back to say, hey, is there anything that we can do, to come up with a compromise that may be, more beneficial to the city and to the property owners along Bethel. That being said, there's really not a lot we can do in terms of employment because we are, even in alternative 3, which reduced it the most, we were still 14% over target. So there's not really a whole lot we can do in terms of employment along the Bethel area, but we have been able to add probably 2/3 of it back in as urban low, with taking more of Phillips Road out. And you'll see that we'll release our map on Friday. So that would give those property owners that have been on the Bethel corridor, that have been paying urban taxes and hoping to develop, would give them more development potential than a rural residential would be. And another good thing about that option is the existing businesses that are within that area that would be urban low. Any business that is existing would go urban commercial or urban industrial. And so, it's kind of a compromise. We put out two, kind of widely different alternatives, got public feedback, and now we're kind of in the mixing, compromising stage. And
So, maybe are there any comments about that?
I can do
You're very knowledgeable about your material, but sometimes other people need to catch up, and sometimes questions help.
Question? It appears not.
What-
Thank you for
one-
checking
one-
it.
Yeah, but one of the questions I had is, are you going to make mixed use available in all zones?
So mixed use, we're looking at, we're adding it as a use to the use table in all commercial zones.
In commercial zones?
And in our urban high, urban medium zone. We're really looking at areas that we've designated urban commercial. We want to be able to develop to the highest intensity. We don't necessarily believe that that was done through our previous efforts. There were still a lot of conditional use permits required in our urban commercial. We also had a minimum density requirement in our mixed use zone that really made it cost prohibitive for developers to actually see mixed use happen. So we're looking at amending our code in that way. So it'd be a use rather than a zone.
No, I got that. I just wondered if it was going to be in all zones, and you said no.
Not all of them.
Urban high and urban medium and.
Urban high, urban medium, neighborhood commercial, urban commercial, regional center. And the mix of use that we're looking at is going along with best planning practices. So it's not necessarily what was thought as smart growth of commercial on the bottom and residential on top. We're also looking at a mix of types of uses. So it could be retail on the bottom and office up top, or vice versa. Really something to spark the economy to build the way that Growth Management Act wants.
I guess what I was wondering, and thank you for reminding us of what the city collectively gave you. I mean, we may not be as familiar with it as you are. So it sounds like, for example, if we wanted the no action alternative, you would still have to come back with an alternative, probably closer to 2 or 3, is what I'm hearing. So maybe we would want to decide, you know, if we had our hands tied behind us and we had to choose what parcels we would give up, what would be least painful. For example, I'll just start. In alternative 2, I don't know that we're that attached to parcel F, for example. Thanks. But and I can appreciate that what we have to minimize, it would be easier if you said, okay, you have to give up like so many acres, but it isn't just acres as I understand it, it's sort of the use. It's not just one number of what we would have to give up, it's a combination of jobs or zoning or units or something.
Correct. It would be easier if we did it based on acres. However, there's a lot of differences in topography, critical areas, existing development. So there's a methodology that would take those out, and it's not a straight acre conversion.
I wish you would turn around and talk to the people that have a little skin in the game here so we can hear what you're saying, please.
Yeah, I appreciate your comment, but it is the meeting is intended as a work study with the council, and that's why the table's set up the way that it is, so.
We haven't been given any opportunity,
This,
like what's been said today.
this meeting, though, is, I appreciate you guys coming this evening and listening to the dialogue here, but this format on this meeting is intended for public comment. We're trying to gain information, from the county staff and understand the process is really the purpose of this evening's. So, the public hearing aspect of it is really happening through the county's process and not our process here at the city. It's really just, it's more of a matter of us trying to understand how we got to where we're at here today.
So let's just want some clarity, maybe you can enunciate a little bit better so that we can get a better understanding.
Okay,
There's a lot
all
of
right.
dialogue happening, so
We could give her a big speaker.
we-
A big microphone.
I don't know if that's going to make a difference.
Excuse me, we still have a right to hear what you say or just
Yeah.
call the meeting off. Okay, we have a right as the public to hear what you have to
Yeah.
say. Go
And-
for it.
Okay.
I live in a city limits. I'm in the city limits.
Right. So maybe this might be easier to hear with, so.
No, Fred, were you done going through the exit?
yeah.
Okay.
Other comments on areas that,
One of my other questions, I forgot what this is.
Try this one.
One of my other questions goes just to, on our map. It's gonna roll again. On the map that I believe the city prepared for us, is A. And again, I'm going, and this is within our UGA right now. But I'm just a little concerned with our citizens in that is right now, I believe, an industrial zone. And I know that those residents there are been paying taxes as though it's a industrial zone. And I know that one of the parcels in that area, the family wanted to build a residence and were denied that because it's industrial. And now we're looking at taking it and making it a 1 to 5. I personally have a hard time reconciling that with what had been the needs of our citizens and they're paying taxes on industrial, and now we're moving it to a 1 to 5. I just have trouble understanding how we can do that without having conversations with the people. And I really don't know the difference between their taxes, between, you know, it being a 1 to 5 as to being industrial.
So with Place A, we may have heard from the same citizen that you heard from, that they felt the area was more conducive to residential development versus industrial. We did hear from, I can't say exactly how many, but a number of residents that live in that area that pointed out to us that it couldn't be developed as industrial because of the critical area constraints as well as the critical aquifer recharge in that area. We also had the tribes note the environmental sensitivity of the area, as well as the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And so it was on the original city map that we received. We evaluated it and concluded with that it probably was not a good place for industry to occur, that there were better areas within the city and within the UGA. As to assessed value, industrial is definitely a higher assessed value than residential, and we are very sensitive to that as the exact amount we would have to have our assessor here. But industrial is more valuable land.
I guess I've got a question or clarification. So I remember when we were going through the Tremont widening project, the assessor came down and gave a presentation, and he basically said at the time, the first time he came down, was that even though it was zoned commercial, until the use changed, it would not be zoned. So if you have a house and you're residential, you're going to pay residential rates. And it wasn't until it changed to a commercial that you'd be assessed. But then 6 months later or so, the assessor came back again and said, no, if it's zoned commercial, you're going to get assessed commercial. So I just want clarification of which is the direction that the county is currently assessing it.
Well, there's one way, and then there's a way that I think that at least our recent past director has trying to get changes made. If once we zone property commercial or industrial, it goes on to the tax rolls, then that either April or October, and they would be assessed. So if it was a residential parcel that we changed to commercial, that assessment would come in that April. So it would start there, and regardless if there was a business there or not. That is not a DCD choice, that's an assessor choice. There's been discussions in planning departments. We hear, this is across the state, we hear it a lot, unfortunately, about the assessed value. And there was something that we were going to work through with WASAC, the Washington Counties Association, that when we made the zoning change, it wouldn't be until that use was going that it would be taxed that way. We haven't been successful in that legislation.
Who was introducing that legislation? Was that our policy staff or was that the assessor?
I believe it was started at Snohomish County, and then through our 5 county meetings with King County, Clark, Kitsap, we were working through that through WASAC and with the other counties. It was one of Larry Keaton's championing items.
And I have a question concerning the area C. And I've mentioned this to my council before, but we currently have all of Sydney Road in our capital facilities plan, or our 6-year tip for reconstruction. And so on the revised preferred alternative, is there going to be an amendment to that boundary to reflect the right-of-way alignment so that that project would be entirely a city project?
So after reviewing this, you again did a great job of laying out the map and associated what either the council has or has not spoken of. Under Area C, I believe under both alternatives, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the city has requested the properties east of Sydney Road to remain in the urban growth area. Is that correct?
that's the suggestion that I've made, but I think our only request so far has been to support no action alternative.
So after receiving this, and it's been just a couple of days, but we feel that would be, it would still be a risk because it would add in a little bit more capacity. But since the city's done a lot of work on that area, that we could probably support the properties to the east of Sydney, along with the
And
recommendation.
that's not my decision. I just wanted to remind everybody because that's part of our impact fee calculation and that project, and so.
And I just want to be clear to the audience and perhaps to county staff that our council has not had a discussion on these individual items.
The area to the west of Sydney here, we had a number of requests in 2011 that requested to come out of the urban growth area. They were, and that was done at that time. We did come here and get city support for those. The area to the west of Sydney, we know has more critical area constraints than the area that your staff is talking about. We expect to analyze the area to the east and get back to the numbers to you, Nick, probably within a week.
Wouldn't it make more sense to have keep all of the properties that front Sydney, whether east or west? I mean, so that I just hate to see a parcel be surrounded by commercial, and this finger. I mean, logical. I'm just looking at logical boundaries.
I think that's an area that we can look at and provide the numbers to both you and our commissioners for their decision on the preferred.
I think one of the problems that I have is we're trying to achieve a number, but we don't know what any of these options are going to provide towards that achievement. So if it's possible to maybe get the population and employment that is associated with D or E or C or whatever, it certainly would make it a little easier.
I don't have them for all of the areas. It takes a while to do analysis. We could definitely bring it back to you. I do have the numbers for D.
Current D or modified D?
D for alternative 2 or 3.
Because it is different.
Okay, I may not have it all here right now, but we can definitely make sure that you get that information. Is there a stand this can go on? I feel like, no? Okay.
Call Jeff.
I can't do that to Jeff. Let's see here. So this is, you can see the pink here, the area, that's the mixed use, that's the top part of F. Where did it go?
Southerly portion.
D, sorry. So this would be the north end of D. And this is, again, the kind of a first look at the staff preferred that will come out on Friday. But again, we looked at further reducing the Phillips area in order to get back some of Area D to be consistent with the comment that we received.
Could we see that exhibit on the projection, please? Would it be possible?
can I keep it for right now and Lynn give it up there?
You know, she'll put it up there in just a moment.
So within the area that it basically is, if you know where Southeast Cedar Road is, it basically, that's where the southern boundary comes across under this. And we'll put it up on the screen in just a moment. Knowing that this is not the final staff preferred, we were able to, in looking at the Phillips Road side, we were able to take a little bit more land out of that side based on public testimony. So we do feel that this southern black line will be able to go further down. But just within this area, it is 831 people for future and about 360 jobs just within this piece here.
So a couple of times you talked about a new staff report coming out Friday. I mean, since it's just a few days away, should we kind of maybe fill us in on what might be coming with that new report on Friday? I mean, this is the first opportunity we've really had to dive into this. We received this back in December and wanted to kind of have a timeout, I know, for our city, for all of us to be able to better understand it. And it sounds like, as we're 3 days away, what maybe differences between what you've shared with us prior to now and Friday might be coming out?
What?
This is the first preview, right?
So what I'm showing you, what we're showing you up here is, it was the most significant area of comment besides the Phillips Road area of being removed from the urban growth area. And again, I stress that this was our first iteration that goes along Cedar, and that in looking at the removal of more of Phillips Road, that we anticipate that line going even further south with the urban low. With the other asterisks of any business that is within that area or what the line ends up being, and again, it's all about balancing the numbers, would be either urban commercial or urban industrial within that area for existing businesses. Based on receiving your packet, we do want to analyze further Area C based on the packet tonight, look at especially the properties to the east of Sydney. And so we're going to try to accommodate that prior to Friday when we are going to be releasing the map. But we definitely want to at least analyze that and have that information for you, as well as our commissioners who will be making the decision on the preferred alternative that will be analyzed. In staff's recommendation to the board, and again, I stress it's a staff recommendation based on public testimony and analysis, there are 3 hearings that will be conducted before the board will make their final decision on the preferred. At least 3. But what staff will be putting forward is the removal of Area A, the removal of Area B. We will be looking at C, and so that may be it'll be maybe a last minute choice, but we'll definitely provide that information to the board so that the board can make the ultimate decision through the preferred alternative. Area D, we again will come as south as we can, depending on what the numbers end up doing with Phillips Road. We were pleasantly surprised that we were able to accommodate going further south with urban low, and we felt it was a good compromise. If we couldn't have the full mixed use, at least it would be an urban designation of 5 to 9 units per acre, with the ability to have sewer to the property, as well as the existing businesses within the area to remain legally conforming in an urban status, which would be the highest tax value. So staff really tried to do the best that we could under the circumstances that we are. And I think that some of the commenters that we've met with that may or may not be in the room will be happier or less unhappy with that alternative. Staff does feel strongly that the Phillips Road area should come out, both based on reclassification requests that we received critical areas, and lack of infrastructure.
How far, what will the changes on Phillips Road look like?
So I can show you hot off the press. We broke out the Phillips Road area into 3 areas. One is the Higgins Plat, which is an approved plat. Hold this. I'm so sorry. I don't mean to have you be my MC. So there are really 3. Maybe I should go over there. Is there a microphone?
Does that one work again? We can get it to work.
I think the issue is being hands-free.
If you turn it on, it looks better.
That's on the podium.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. So we broke Phillips Road, and I'll show you on here, really into 3 areas. This area right here would be the Higgins Plat. That is an approved final plat with our department. And then there's 2 areas that I'll show you more on our maps, but basically extending somewhere over here. We've broken it out into Phillips Mid and then Phillips South. So this is that Phillips Plat, or excuse me, the Higgins Plat area. Takes all of this area in, and again, it has an approved population capacity of 178. Staff is recommending that this stay in as they have a sewer availability letter, and are really close to Sedgwick up here, and the property owner would like to remain in. This is Phillips Road Mid. Sorry about my scratch up here. This area here has a population capacity of urban low at 524 people. And then this finally is the Phillips Road South. This is in the area that we had the most public testimony of requesting to be out of the urban growth area. So it's at the very, very bottom here, and it has a population capacity of 628 people. So staff would recommend that both Phillips South and the middle area of Phillips come out. That would remove 1,152 people from the urban growth area, and would allow us to include this mixed use area, and again, it may go up to the final wire, but it will probably be something like this. And then this would all be urban low, with the exception of any existing business that's either commercial or industrial, that would go urban commercial or urban industrial.
So that portion that you just deleted on Bethel, the southerly portion, how much is that save or reduce the population?
The southern end, I don't have that with me tonight, but I can get that to you.
Okay.
Again, the Bethel area, the biggest concern is employment, because the city and the county together we're significantly more over in terms of employment than population. So with the give or the compromise of Phillips, we can accommodate those folks here along Bethel. And one of the main reasons why we're supporting this, there's development in the city. There's been a lot of development activity here, but also sewer comes down to Fred Meyer, so there would be sewer really relatively close to these residential areas that we feel that it could develop. The transportation corridor, Kitsap Transit, comes down. It's much more, urban in nature and has the ability to develop more so than a Phillips Road area that has a lot of farming and open space. So the cat's out of the bag for Friday now, you know. Close of business.
Ask the question, Greg.
Are F and G staying in?
Staff is recommending that F be removed, and I believe G is staying in. I stole her pen.
For those that can't see, can you mention which street G is? It's basically Mile Hill East.
I know there's a lot of variables that go into this, but it just seems like the natural growth areas, especially from a commercial standpoint, would be, you know, C, D, and G, with our city's infrastructure. And I'd hate to see us be short-sighted on not allowing flexibility with those areas, but those are just such corridors within our city that have, you know, freeway frontage, the growth on Sydney Road, and obviously Mile Hill being another, you know, certainly the things that would concern me the most. When might we see an updated map from what you guys are presenting on Friday, just so we could maybe do a little research on kind of the high-level stuff you just shared with us?
So we will release the map of staff preferred by close of business on Friday. We will still continue to analyze, mostly from our board's direction, so they will have enough information to make their decision. Again, we, you know, just got this packet recently, but we want to look further at C, as it's an area that, unlike D, E, F, and G, I mean, we've spent a lot of time analyzing those areas. So I'd like us to go back and get the information for the board to be able to make up their mind there. We do know that if it goes back in an employment zoning, the numbers would be a little bit, they would be higher than even the 14% over that alternative 3 is. So we would need to talk with our legal department about that, but definitely at least analyze it. We can analyze it to the east and have a number for that, and then maybe analyze it as a whole, so that, you know, there can be a little bit of a compromise. One other benefit too, that we thought of, you know, removing more of the Phillips area at this time and allowing more of the area along Bethel to stay in, would be the Puget Sound Regional Council is going to be undertaking an update to Vision 2040 to make it Vision 2050. At that time, it would probably be really good for the county and the city to work together on how this area is going to grow, and have PSRC potentially look at, you know, do we need to split out the small cities? Do we need to give the small cities more of an allocation of jobs? And allowing this area to stay in, even though it would be primarily residential, that could be an area of, if we were able to be successful and get more employment for the south end, that could be an area where it could go next in our next comp plan update. So we really feel like this is a good compromise for what we have to do at this time, but also looking into the future and updating a vision.
Comments or questions from the council?
I guess I have a couple questions, only I guess ignorance on utilities in G. Is there utilities close? Excuse me, close by there? You had mentioned that in B we've got a sewer at Fred Myers, so how does that? Where does it relate to G?
Portions of G have sewer on them.
Sorry.
So it would meet that criteria. Okay. We do know that, I mean, Mile Hill is a very successful business corridor, so we also looked at breaking it out, you know, where do we stop? And really it was about the numbers, but we want to be able to support the businesses along there.
And C, those areas of C have utilities on the front of them, right?
Either on them or very, very close. I don't want to speak for the Public Works Director. Yeah, I think there's a sewer line that runs right down there, yeah.
I don't think we heard what we wanted to hear tonight, but we got, you know, understand the process, how we got here, and what's being asked of us, or asked of you.
I do have another question, Mayor, or I guess it's a comment, and the boundaries, and let's go back to Phillips Road, just because. But that's been in our UGA since about 2005 or 2007. Six. And now we're talking about taking part of it out. And we're going to look at this comp plan again in 8 years. And what are the chances then that we're going to need to put it back because they need water and sewer or whatever? I just have a hard time of taking property out of the UGA after there was quite an effort or quite a process to get it in the UGA. And now we're taking it out, and my thoughts on this are a little different, coming more from a personal level than a city council level. But people have made investments out there, and because if they had 5 acres, they could build 4 to 9 houses, and now we're only going to allow them to build 1. It just seems like it's kind of a yo-yo. If they're out, they need. I don't know, we put them in, now we're gonna take them out, may they go back in again. It just seems, and it's kind of my same feeling on what we had seen as Section A. People had wanted to do things there. They had wanted to build a home. They were told no. And now, 5 years later, 6 years later, it's gonna be okay. It just doesn't seem fair to our citizens.
We definitely agree with that. There's, the process we have to do what the law says and what the vision tells us we have to do in order to maintain our funding. The regional growth strategy, again, will be updated to go out an additional 10 years. This city is not unique in the problems that you are facing. It's happening in some of the small cities that were in 2015 adopters, where the city is over capacity or is planning for more population than what vision allows. And in regional staff committee, we've learned at PSRC that they are not certifying those plans. So this process, regardless of a UGA reduction, the discussion would have to happen at the city level, because the city itself is over capacity. So if staff has not shared with you yet what is going on at PSRC, that would probably be wise to have that discussion, because some of those city plans of small cities are not being adopted due to overcapacity issues. But the county, we do feel that under the parameters that we're under, that we're putting forward the best compromise that we have with what we have to deal with for right now. But I think participating strongly in the update to vision will be very good for both of our small cities for different reasons. Port Orchard for having excess capacity, and Paulsbo is growing faster than was anticipated. So there's a number of issues that I think needs to be addressed in the regional growth strategy moving forward.
I actually think that your question is an excellent one. It's really tough to know what citizens want and
Use both of them.
Okay, there you go. But Kitsap has been tested a couple of times at the Growth Management Hearings Board, and we have found it very, very difficult to come into compliance even minimally. And so it's pretty important that we, government jurisdictions, be talking together. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here today to have some kind of interaction, and maybe we could initiate this as a regular practice. We do have to have the 2016 plan done by June. But that doesn't mean that we have to stop talking about ongoing methods that we want to use and decisions that we want to make together and begin visioning for the future. For me, that means that we're talking to our citizens maybe a lot more than we currently do.
Further comments, questions? Thank you guys for coming this evening.
We want to also thank you for the opportunity to come. We know it's not the best of circumstances, but we also wanted to compliment your staff and what a great job they've been working with us through the comp plan process.
Our next item, you're part of that too. Parking issue, I brought it up.
I won't be available. You can have
A couple times a year.
Weird, isn't it? Well, yes, we should have had this conversation a year ago, 2 years ago. What just happened? What's in the process of happening that we're unaware of?
We felt underutilized too. They say they had discussions, we never had a chance to input because we didn't even know, we were blindsided by it. So, I don't get the story. We didn't get a chance to go on record and say that.
So moving on to our item 2 on our agenda, and it has to do with some parking permits. There's a back exit. So what item 2 represents is, it was a practice, I guess, started under Mayor Capolla's administration that the county has a group of volunteers, in particular their planning commissioners and their board of equalization. They each meet once a month, I believe, and the hearing examiner. And they, under Mayor Capolla's administration, he issued parking passes so that they could park up around the courthouse since they're up there volunteering their time. Seemed like a great idea. Mayor Mathis continued that practice. Then we had the discussion about our residential parking permits, and it came to my attention that we really don't have any procedure or permission to do what we were doing. So versus putting this off and having it go through the committee process, I felt it would be important to just bring it to the committee of the whole this evening and potentially, and these boards all meet once a month, not on the same day, I don't believe, and I would just like the ability to provide those volunteers the ability to park up at the courthouse, up around the courthouse.
If I could ask a question, Brandy, how might this tie to our public properties meeting last week with some of the draft parking changes you were going to bring forward? How would those two perhaps marry?
It'd be a separate issue because this isn't related to residential permits. It would be a different section of the code, which I think falls under the 10.12, which is the stopping, standing, that type of ordinance. And if it helps, I did speak with the chief and my front office staff, Janine, to see if there's any complaints over the last 6-7 years of these permits being issued, and we have not received any. So it's just more of a procedural thing that we need to get the support of the council and before we can continue issuing them.
Example 2, Mayor Lynn provides me, I got policy boards that I sit on over in Bremerton, and Mayor Lynn provides me with a parking pass. So I can stay all day on Tuesday once a month and not get a parking ticket over there. So it's not uncommon. It's happening in other communities. I think it's a good idea. We don't have anything that says that I can give those parking passes out.
Can I expand it?
Sure.
Because I have no problem, and I think it's a good gesture on our part to be able to let the volunteers up there park. I would like the same courtesy held to city council people, members here in Port Orchard when they come to committee meetings, to not have to get up and move their car every 2 hours.
And I did reach out to the city of Bremerton to see how they handle their permits, and there's just a provision in their code that states that, it's the mayor or the council authority. I'll get that exact language, and if you're interested, be happy to provide a draft of where it would be placed in the ordinance for such action by the council.
Seeing heads shaken.
I support it too. I just wonder, what is the general area where people are parking though? Is it Division mainly, or is it?
It's
Austin?
Klein in Austin.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they try to
Austin,
stay
Klein.
off the main division, but actually we have a lot of people coming to court on certain days, and sometimes those are the same days that they need to be there. And the court folks are coming from the county and the cities on a regular basis.
So your council committees with the 2-hour zone out there are inadequate also? You feel?
Nancy got a ticket.
I'm sure you can take it.
Okay, so obviously it's not inadequate.
I actually went out and moved my car within the time allotted. I didn't wait
Get enough chalk off the tire?
Yeah, it doesn't happen very
I'm just a
often.
new guy, but by gosh, I'm a lot smarter now.
Yeah.
All right, sounds like we've got consensus. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you
Brito.
so much for inviting me to come and chat with you and having the staff. I think I've really appreciated the opportunity and look forward to it again.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Chief Wright, are you here about the next item on our agenda? Why don't you come join us?
Come get close to a microphone.
Thank you for joining us this evening. Okay. Banners over the marquee. This is,
You don't want to do this anymore, is that it?
Well, this is a continuation of discussion we started last fall for some of the changes in the council and the mayor's office. And we sort of lost a little bit of ground there with all the change. I know it's still on the agenda to discuss this, but yeah, it's a little bit of history on this. This goes back to the late last century, or right around the turn of the century, when the city of Port Orchard merged in with what was then District 7. And the city's department was primarily a volunteer department with a smattering of establishment of a career staff. The districts surrounding the city, we ran a lot of mutual aid together. We provided all of the ALS and BLS support in the city at the time. So the merger made sense. It certainly fit the scope of what went on at the time, even with other districts that joined into what eventually became South Fire and Rescue. The banner piece, as well as a few other things in the ILA that I know, Mayor, you and I want to get together on here shortly to look at. The banners were sort of a piece that came with that based on it was something that the volunteer fire department from the city of Port Orchard traditionally did. And I have no idea when those wires went up, what time frame that started. But
just before the turn of the century.
Yeah. Okay.
For history.
But the issue really at hand is it was a couple different things. One of it is the complicated nature of things that have gone on in the fire service since that time. I mean, back in the 1990s, the training standards, the keeping of records, the requirements to be what we would call an IDLH firefighter were totally different than they are today. And agencies such as South Kitsap have worked hard to try to be in compliance with training standards. Our volunteers are required to meet the same standards as their career staff. So the idea that Tuesday night was, a get-together for a drill night, and we'll go hang the banner up afterwards, and then we'll go out and play cards afterwards. Those days, certainly I remember them. I was a young man in the department at the time, but the volunteers are just as busy as everyone else these days with that. So over the last 15, 20 years, we went through a number of different series. The volunteers from Port Orchard, of course, have all gone away. Now they're all just South Kitsap volunteers. Any of them that are left, I don't even know if there's any originals left. But we went from that to looking for other groups that might be interested in taking this on. The idea was fundraisers. The South Kitsap Pee Wee football did it for a little while. Most recently, the Afternoon Rotary Club has taken it on. And all of that while the overall ordinances that govern the banners are run through the city here, and yet the collection of them, the taking them in and out, making sure they're ready to go up happens up at our headquarters office. So the citizens were running between both places. If there were problems, they had to come back and forth. All we really did was collect them, and then most recent years, hand them off to the Rotary, and then they would get them up and down. And so it felt more like we were in the middle of this sometimes. And I know there have been some concerns lately about content of banners and what the city chooses to have or may not be able to have up there. But we don't look at them for content. We're more in the logistics of getting them up on the wires. But the other challenge of that, though, is that the setup down there is a couple of guy wires that go across the street. It's in sort of the traffic area. You have the covered area that covers the sidewalk, which is metal. A percentage of the time it's wet. Over the years, we've had issues with our volunteers. Both the groups, in fact, the Rotary quit because they were concerned about safety.
Liability.
And liability, what happens when somebody falls. And I didn't have a good answer for them on that. The reality is we're not going to bring our ladder truck down there and set that up. So we do it with a ground ladder, or we did it with a ground ladder. I believe that's what the Rotary and the Pee Wee football group did also. But, a lot of times going up during the dark hours and evenings and such. And so the overall component of the way that citizens have to deal with this, to actually go through the process between the two agencies, the safety issues, and then just the idea that, the city has people down there dealing with seasonal decorations, watering plants, the things that go on, light bulbs, things of that nature. And the discussion was, would this be suited better for just another piece of the public works routine that they do? I assume the bucket truck, I haven't actually see how they do all the light bulbs in town or such. But that was that discussion, and whether it sort of more or less has grown past the good old days, if you will, of the volunteers just taking the time to throw those up because they had plenty of time on their hands on their drill night. And so that's what brings us to here. I don't know if that's too much of a review. I apologize. I know you've had quite a discussion already tonight on your other issues.
Well, I know one of the concerns, I know, Nick, you're trying to stay silent here on this, but I'm not going to let you, is the Supreme Court's decision on the content of the, but so we're not in a position, and today we don't have an attorney either to give us a legal opinion on that or to help us redraft our signed ordinance, in the next week or two for sure. Hoping to have an attorney on staff by the end of the week. I know that we've got, organizations that have invested in banners that expect to be able to use that space. So I don't have a good answer, but I want, I'd like to find a way for that to continue, but I understand I'm a member of the Rotary Club currently that's doing it, and it's not real safe. We've got a liability issue if we allow citizens to go down there, and we basically go up on Rudy's balcony and snap it at one end, and we're running in the traffic with the banner. I helped one day, and I haven't been back.
We had the discussion at Public Properties according to this, it was September, and it was the Economic Development Committee.
Yes, I think that was the group.
And at the time, we asked, Mark was there, can Public Works hang the banner? And you said, yeah.
Yes, there was some quid pro quos with that, but what I said is that the council directs the mayor to direct the Public Works Department to hang the banners, we will. We do have concerns, obviously, with, the legality. Anybody could tomorrow go down and say, get this off my building, because there is no agreement in place to have the guy wires connected. And how that affects Public Works is the tensioning of those cables are reaching their limit, and we've leaned on Puget Sound Energy or Wave Cable to do that for us. CenturyLink, I think, has done it in the past. I think the last time they tensioned the cables, they basically said these things are going to snap pretty soon. They're losing their tensile capability, and when that happens, to have to go back and put a new table on these buildings, it could raise this issue. So we're required to maintain a 20-foot minimum clearance, which is another issue with WashDOT that technically we probably would need some sort of use permit for that right away, and we don't. So yeah, and then there's the whole content issue. So the Public Works Department will hang them if we're directed to do so. Will a banner come down at some point? You know, potentially. Will somebody say, I don't want this on my building anymore? Potentially. So I think anything that we do is of a short-term nature. I personally think that we need to look at this at a once we have an attorney, a much larger global look that includes not only content, but easement or agreement use, so that if we're going to commit to it, it's in place in somewhat perpetuity rather than something that could be just ended in 2 weeks because of one of those three things.
I believe what the conversation was in September, and then again this month. In this month it was at the public properties, is we have probably a long-term issue that needs some discussion, but we also have a short-term issue, you know, with this season, because I know, or at least it's my position, that we have several organizations that use that as the significant part of their marketing for whatever their event is. And in September, I believe our at least indication to the fire department was, we'll get this taken care of and you won't have to worry about it. And I thought March 1st was kind of the deal because that's when we set the calendar.
Well, yeah, we talked about the end of the year, and then we realized that the scheduling, the yearly scheduling, which there is a little bit of a horse race for that at times, moved a little bit later in the year. But yeah, and all these concerns are, what we see is, I don't know how the banners were picked in that location, you know, whose wire it is or what have you. I did go down and look at what Gig Harbor does in their city, and on their way into downtown, just on the entrance there, they have, you know, they look like light poles, you know, the same green ornamental ones that they have throughout, and it's dedicated just to that. I don't know how they get their banners up there, but they definitely have a banner program that has a little bit more of a thought process than what looks like we have here, and I have no idea how far back that goes in the city of Port Orchard. But
how far out do we have groups right now that are under the assumption that their banners are going up? Like that have gone through and filed a permit with?
Well, the process is they go up for 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you have a certain amount per year. And there's usually a little bit of a rush because there's certain times that people want in there for their specific job. But it fills up for the most part the majority of the year. There's every once in a while a week or two where you notice there's nothing up there. But there are times that if nothing's up there, we'll leave a banner up for an additional 2 weeks because nothing claimed it. But summertime is the peak load, and then some of the seasonal events.
But I mean, right now, if people
they come the 1st of March. Yeah. You take your application the 1st of March with your $100, and you stand in line at the fire department to get on the calendar.
Right, but I mean, right now, between now and how many groups have paid a fee already?
Between now and March 1st, I would say the worst case is if you figure we're in the last half of January, and the new banner is up there for the school bond. So we have February, and then it'll be March. So there might be 2 more hangings that go up if there's something on the list, and I did not check that.
Okay, so for the next 6 weeks, there are 2 banner changes. Can Public Works hang the banner that's already been approved and money collected for? I guess that's the first question.
Somebody hands me a banner and says, put it up from A to Z, and we'll put it up and we'll take it down. Yeah.
Is that a reason? I mean, these people.
I mean, it certainly helps with my issue, but like I said, I think that the council has.
There's a big. We know there's a bigger issue. We do.
Break it into 2 parts.
And I don't know if it matters today or March 1st. You know, I mean,
so
you're possible as a target.
So your goal is March 1st. You don't want people lined up at your office.
Well, it'd be nice if we could direct them to the new process. I don't know if there's time for that. I'm not opposed to trying to help figure out the path to the new process, whatever the city decided even, it sounds like you may be making a decision if there is a need for a banner program under the current changes that are impacting it. But we, certainly as you said, the Rotary Group stepped away, so I'm sort of a man without a dedicated spot here to get these up right now. We're kind of the one we had right now. I didn't have to go hang it personally, but that was a discussion. Our piece of hanging them, we'd like to try to solve it as soon as possible. I understand the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, it sounds like what we're talking about is some sort of interim program until we address the issues such as what Mark talked about, and those are all significant issues. And I don't see why if we didn't take this form and tweak a little bit, the hanging request form, that you couldn't disassociate yourself sooner rather than any time later.
We do have, there's a Supreme Court ruling
on content.
Yeah. And that's the other piece that we need some input from our new legal counsel that doesn't
Right.
As
Yeah,
tonight doesn't exist.
I would recommend that as soon as we have legal counsel and prior to Mark having his crew put up the sign, that we run it by legal counsel that says, we're going to hang this sign, fire has approved it, number one.
We don't approve it. I mean, all we do is speak as a company. There's nowhere in our standard policy that we step outside of what the city requests. We're simply the means for
First come, first serve, organized.
No one's ever come and said, hey, chief, what do you think about this one? It is.
And we haven't had a problem then with content.
Right. Well, there's a resolution that was set by the council that outlines the process that says, hey, the fire authority is the one that hangs the banner, but they have to abide by the city council's process. And so there's 2 standing resolutions, and I believe they were part of your packet this evening, that basically says what the process is. Sets the fee, says where they have to take the banner. It says that application, the criteria means that they have to be an eligibility of a group or an event, and the availability of the request time period for the banner to be displayed. So, I mean, there's minimal criteria that is in these resolutions that I would recommend the new legal counsel review prior to putting up that banner, because I think what's ultimately is going to happen is that we will repeal these 2 resolutions that basically relieves the fire authority of hanging the banners, and then the city will have to adopt a new policy stating that Public Works will do it, clerks will calendar it, and DCD will monitor it for the sign code.
I guess the question is, where's the attorney? I mean, what do we need the attorney to review our process?
This is in violation of the sign code, is what I...
Well, yeah, this policy right here, first of all, your policy should not be done by resolution. And so whenever this was originally done, it looks like in 1998, this should have been codified. And right now, our sign code contradicts what's in this resolution. And so if you repeal this, then all you have is the sign code, which does not allow banners over the roadway. And so we need a policy to be written in place to allow this to happen. But right now, it's allowed under the resolution, which conflicts with our sign code, only if the fire district approves it. It says that applications will be made to the fire authority, and presumably the fire authority.
So it sounds like, hey, we need an ordinance to achieve this instead of a resolution. I know our insurance company has a requirement now. Any ordinance we do, isn't it, requires legal review? Is that correct? Or
our municipal code.
Municipal code, okay. So,
okay, but I just need to make sure I understand it. We have a calendar of people who have signed up to have their banners put up from now until March 1, when the new calendar gets created. So for those people who are on the calendar, why can't we just have Public Works put those up? Maybe we need to say something, we're not going to take anything new start March 1 until we've had an opportunity to develop a new policy. But for those who are on the calendar now...
I think we were saying the same thing.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand.
We're going to hand even though it says the fire department's doing it.
What I heard over here from Nick was we're not to do anything until we've had the late attorney review it.
Well, my concern is that the banner that would be going up on a week from Tuesday concerns a position on a bond issue. And the
It's up
city
right
staff
now.
would be.
It's up right now.
Oh, okay, I didn't realize that had gone up already.
It's up-
We didn't hang it.
Okay, well, that's my concern, is that we were going to be hanging that particular sign, and that concerned me.
Well, and council already took a position, we're supporting the bond issue anyway, so.
If anyone ever came in and said, hey, chief, what the heck did you put that sign up? I would say, well, we're referring down here to the city because
Sure.
it's
Directly to the mayor.
your area, we were just,
So it sounds like we got 2 more times we might have to hang this banner.
oh. And like you said, depending on the logistics of where you go with this, I'm not.
And we've got a bigger issue that we need to tackle in repealing this resolution, adopting an ordinance that's similar. It sounds like Gig Harbor may have something.
Well, then it sounds like too, whatever ordinance we adopt needs to be consistent with whatever sign code.
Sign code and the First Amendment, the appeal of the First Amendment.
Okay, just
Provision within it.
Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
your turn.
my turn. My turn is this. I agree with what you're saying, and I would like to see us have that done by March 1st. It's not going to happen, John. You and I both know that.
Why?
Do you think we can get that done by March 1st? A new sign code?
Oh, now
No.
that's different. I thought you were talking about the calendar.
I think that where that could potentially go is that if we have a designated point, we could put it in the street and sidewalk chapter of our code and have it as something other than a development regulation. But until we talk to a new attorney and get an opinion on that, I'm not sure that it can be done. But I think it could be a very simple ordinance.
How hard is it to make a modification to our sign ordinance? A small modification?
It's got to go to the planning.
Is it a motion being made in
It's
the
a planning
gavel
commission
fall?
hearing.
Pardon me?
It's got to go to the planning commission
Why?
because it's a development regulation.
It's required under state law that development regulations go to planning commission.
Right, if you want to just,
Code is-
yeah.
We can't even make an amendment to that without going through that process.
We did with the,
If you do
with the
it,
sign that was put on the.
Kitsap Bank.
yeah, you can declare an emergency or do
We
some sort
declare
of
an
interim.
emergency and put a provision for the banner, and then we go through whatever process that looks at the whole
But
thing. and
but maybe it
it's
doesn't need to be in our sign code.
Yeah, I'm thinking it can go in the right of way or the street chapter of our code. But, I really want to talk to whatever attorney we hire about the implications of the
Well, we got
content neutrality.
cross-examine over that, then we can at least
The
do
goal is to have this done by March 1st.
the banner
The
portion.
banner portion of however we're gonna
What
administer
can we
it.
do? Let's not get hung up on what we can't do.
Yeah, let's get, what
Make this
can we
happen.
do? I like that. I like that. Ed.
Well, and the other thing is, even if it's 2 steps, even if we have something for this season,
We could even go month to month. It's like, if we have something, I mean, if we're not quite done with something, we can allow people to come in on March 1st. You're only going to commit until April 15th because there's something else in the process where by April 15th.
I don't think that's doing service to our nonprofits and the events that want to use that. I think we should be able to come up with a calendar that takes us through our season, which is September. And if that's what we do on the emergency basis, yeah.
I hope we can limit it to the nonprofits as we have done in the resolution.
I don't think,
But
you're dancing on a fine wire. You are basically saying, if you start hanging banners, Espresso's Gone Wild and Doris can say, I'm gonna put a banner that has, photographs and content, and you cannot refuse them. So just be careful where you're dancing.
We've got some criteria currently. Once again, we're all practicing law here tonight because we don't have an attorney, so
Now, we've
let's.
got a lot of nonprofits that are going to expect, they may not be aware of this, are going to show up at the fire department and they're going to.
That's where we want them.
Is that what's going to happen, or is the city going to take responsibility for accepting all those reservations on the calendar like the fire department has done?
Or is there something we can do, like, could we take them and get the calendar established for you and then hand it off? And then let them all know, hey, next year,
Yeah.
everything's gonna be run out of the courthouse. I'm willing to
Might
help
be
try
easier
to
to-
find that transition for you.
I would
do
say
that.
if you could at least fill the calendar, given the schedule that I've heard, if you could at least, we could impose upon you to at least still accept the applications, because there's just a window.
There's a big rush, there certainly is a big rush, and
And-
people I'll come to work that morning, people will be sitting in lawn chairs in front of the.
Yeah, it might be a good idea if we handle it this year, because you're gonna have people who aren't gonna get the word, they're gonna show up, they're gonna be
Right.
upset, and they're gonna have to come
So
down
there would
here.
be some
And
practicality
then they're
for
gonna
us.
lose their place in line.
To
because they have to come here.
Exactly, and then they're
You
gonna
know.
have a brand new problem.
If
But
you're
again-
willing to
Oh,
administer
I'm
that, and I
willing.
guess, and part of that process is making them aware, this is the last year,
It'll be
next
the
year,
city
will
next year.
it'll be
And
better.
perhaps
Have a
by
brand
the
new
time March 1 rolls around, maybe we have a memo that we could make available.
we should
that
hand
day.
something out
Because
to
we may be
each.
saying, look,
Well-
we're just trying to get an order of what's coming, but this process today on March 1st at SK, the fire district is not guaranteeing anything. So we have something on behalf of the city.
Yeah, we could have a staff member up there that they fill out they turn in the application, and then somebody at Public Works or Planning stands there and saying, here's this memo, so that they know that this is the last year, and there's gonna be a change in the process, and that they need to either, like, sign up and be on a list or something, but we should.
And I've already been approached by probably 4 or 5 nonprofits already within the last couple of weeks. It says, hey, I understand there's going to be some changing. What's so, I mean, it's already in the works. And then the fire department staff and we communicate quite a bit, and per our own resolution, they give us copies, and they also give us a copy of the calendar. So we're already working with that process right now. I have a list of all the calendar of the application and the copies of the applications. So, the city staff and the fire staff can absolutely work together and get what's on the calendar now to Public Works and move forward and notifying the nonprofits. I don't think that'll be an issue.
I don't think it'd be any challenge at all for us to get the March 1st thing going. And then, like I said, we'll have letters there throughout the year. If somebody comes in, we'll just let them know, hey, this is where it's gonna happen from now on.
Even after March 1st, when the line's gone, that you just refer them to our staff.
Yeah, and it seems like we could make this, the percentage of these folks are back every year. There's a very regular bunch, they hang, Fathoms is always the same time, so there's every once in a while something new, like the current bond issue for the school. But, it's a routine for many.
So what I'm hearing is next 2 banner changes, we're just gonna hand off to us. You're gonna process those applications March 1st. We're gonna develop some sort of a letter or memo that will go out with those applications, notifying people that they need to come to City Hall next year. And then after March 1st, they're gonna come to City Hall for any of it. And this is gonna be another item added to my list for the attorney that's priority.
That's right.
It's growing.
Or 42 priority 1.
Yeah, it's not
Like
that
an
bad,
answer
but
this afternoon.
there's a dozen anyway. Okay, I think we've got it covered.
Okay, and so Mark, I'll have my folks contact you if there are banners that are hung here in the next little bit, because we would have them delivered, and we'll have them up there where they normally get picked up at, but I'll.
Brad comes down, just give it to him.
Yeah, have them drop it down.
Yeah.
Okay, that'd be good.
And I know that we want to discuss our ILA.
Yeah, we've
and-
got
and-
just a lot of things in there that need to be
Yeah.
looked at. It's as antiquated as, something like that does get over time.
We've got an ILA with the fire district that names people that do things. It's
Just some things that need cleaned up, but I do appreciate everybody's willingness to hear us on this. It's, like I said, I didn't have some of the answers when people were talking about the safety issues and such, and it really was a poor customer service thing. We've had people running back and forth between the city and the fire district, and it was just, it worked back in the 1990s, I'm sure, well. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you. Get back on track here. I don't think we need 30 minutes for transportation. What do we have on updates? We've got under Tremont.
We're going to do some checking on the transportation benefit district, and when we needed to meet, how that was going to look like.
That was intended to be brought up tonight too, was the TBD topic and whether or not the county, and that slipped through the cracks. I apologize.
But even before that, we established our TBD framework, and now we have to do something.
We do.
We're authorized to do something.
I think you need to schedule a first meeting and
Yeah, we gotta
put
And I
together an
thought-
agenda.
Right, I thought that we were going to have some homework on that.
I think that's also another one of my.
The priorities?
Another one of my the attorney's priorities.
Are you gonna get a cut from your new attorney?
Yeah.
We're gonna be over budget in the first week. We want to test you out. Give us answers to these 12 issues.
That's just what I was going to say. We can give 4 to each one of the candidates.
Whoever comes up with the best ideas and solves our problems. Okay. I will add that to the list, and I apologize that it slipped through the cracks. I know that with Tremont, we've got our applications are due the end of February.
The schedule, the call for projects will happen in February. The actual submittal of the countywide, there's the regional eligibility and the countywide eligibility. That is, they're due early March, and then both the countywide project application, they get submitted in April. So March really is screening forms through PSRC for both regional and countywide. And then April, we have the countywide submittal of applications. I do have a meeting set up with Kelly McGordy this Friday after the RPEC meeting, because obviously I need to hear firsthand what they told the group so that I understand what was said, because it didn't necessarily mesh with what I've been told prior. So I'm going to get confirmation from Kelly and Jeff Storar so that I have clear, defined marching orders on both either the regional or the countywide.
And we don't want to give up our countywide just because we applied with the regional.
But the regional also goes through the KRCC.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Basically, regional goes to the KRCC, countywide goes to the KRCC. The regional just goes on the regional list. And historically, KRCC has taken funding. If somebody gets funded on the regional, then that's taken into account on the countywide process because the regional happens just prior to the countywide.
But in essence, if I understand the KRCC, we have 6 slots to apply. KRCC blesses each one of those 6.
For regional, yeah.
So they just give us permission to apply and use one of those 6, which
Right.
they never use all 6 anyway, so it's...
Yeah, the issue is going to be how to package Tremont so that it's regional eligible, and that's what I need to talk to Kelly about. Because the city of Port Orchard can't be if you go with historical rules, we can't be the lead agency on a regional project. It'll have to be the Port of Bremerton or the city of Bremerton or Kitsap County.
How about Kitsap Transit?
Could be Kitsap Transit. It has to be a regional qualified person. The city is not, so that's why I need to talk to Kelly, because I know that.
That's what she told us, as long as our project connected to a regional center. She didn't say anything
There's
about
something
whether or not
about,
we were
right, there's
capable.
something about a regional corridor.
But that means that what she meant to say though was, and that's what Bainbridge did, is you have the connectivity, but there has to be somebody that you're connected to that's going to be the lead on the application. The city of Port Orchard can't be a regional
Was
applicant.
it Bainbridge lead on theirs?
No,
It was City of Seattle.
Was it WSF?
It was WSF.
Is either washed out through Washington State Ferries and the city of Seattle, and Bainbridge came in as a partner, but they weren't the lead applicants. That's how Bainbridge got that money. So that's what I need to confirm with Kelly.
And on that same note, I did learn that for the other 3 PSRC counties, the application funding under this round requires that you have your plan certified this summer. But we actually, because our deadline is June 30th, we no longer have to have it certified in order to get funding in this cycle, but we will for 2018.
Correct. This funding cycle is off of the 12/31/2015 comp plans.
Correct.
Going back to your discussion about lead, is there any advantage to choosing one lead over another, the port over the county over Bremerton?
I think at this point, we're just looking for somebody that has a badge to get us in the door, and whoever that is.
Based on our conversations with Commissioner Garrido, I think probably Kitsap County
Yeah.
is the best alternative. Bremerton's relationship over at PSRC is,
The county's regional connection is Silverdale. It's not the county,
But they're still
eligible?
they're still eligible as the county can submit projects, because they've submitted projects on the
Outside
regional
of the
floor.
Silverdale
Yeah.
area?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
but our nexus to this is that it's jobs at the regional center in Bremerton.
Well, and well, quite honestly, I think the Port of Bremerton is probably the best lead applicant because of the Clifton Skia Connector Road to Tremont. I mean, that has more connectivity as a
I'll let you have your meeting with Kelly and then let us know who we need to approach to be the lead agency.
And then we'll make we need to be very careful that we don't give up our ask in the county-wide.
Correct.
Right.
Just because we applied it over.
Yeah, we won't give up our ask. The only thing that could happen is if we somehow scored well at the regional and they allocated a large amount of funding, in the countywide, they're going to say, okay, Port Orchard, you're good. We're not going to give you anything. Because that's what we did with the port. That's what we did with the county.
So if we got $18 million, we don't get any more?
If we got,
Not even
if we got like
200,000?
3 or 4 million,
50,
we probably
we wouldn't ask for anything more.
The other thing that we want to be careful with that regional money is air quality is 50% of the scoring criteria at PSRC.
Right. And so the issue there is going to be if there is a county, if there's a Kitsap County regional project, let's say it's Kitsap Transit, that has a project that scores well with air quality, typically all the regional projects for our KRCC have scored low because we just don't have the point structure or the ability to score points. And so we've really only gotten one project approved for the regional every cycle, and that's not a project that was at the line. It was a project that was 60 projects below the line, but due to geographic equity, they moved that one project up. So the Tremont project first has to get into the regional, then it's going to be competing against other potential Kitsap regional projects to be the top regional project from this area, that then it'll get funded through the regional process from its scoring. So I have a lot to talk to Kelly about. I just need to make sure I understand, because RPAC has a very definite process, and that's where the regional goes through, is through RPAC.
Okay. And just remember that one of our boxes we have to check on our application is that our council's passed a resolution in support of the project, and that we're going to come up with the funding.
Right.
And the additional funding that the difference.
Right, and then Brianna and I are also going to try to get a letter of interest, for lack of a better term, from TIB, just to get something, because we're playing the 6-month gap on we're both last in, so both PSRC and TIB have a policy to be the last in with a fully funded project, so we have to, I think maybe a letter of interest might allow us to bridge that gap. So, and I'll talk about that with Kelly on Friday as well.
Okay. Just got a couple little things, housekeeping items I want to touch on. There was an email sent to the council, and Mark's got this already, Jamie Mitchell in regards to has Sydney Road kept up. You guys all see that in your email boxes, and Mark's already got PSC looking at the lighting. I drove out there, I didn't see any less lighting than other areas in the city. I did drive it at night, but
we've got PSC on 2 light that's going to go down and take a look at maybe installing some strategic masthead off of existing poles, like we did on Bethel last year. It's a fairly inexpensive way to provide some additional lighting. The bigger picture, obviously, in this complaint was, I think it's more of a lighting, but it's pedestrian. They're looking for the area to be more pedestrianized, and that project is in our tier 2. It is a minor arterial, so we can get federal funding in the future, but there's there's a backlog of federal projects right now. So as far as response, it's my understanding that the mayor is going to be providing some sort of response, or did you want?
Well, that's, is, you guys want the response coming from Mark? I mean, it was really an email to you guys, making a public record, or a Public Works complaint about lack of sidewalks and
Right,
lighting
and-
on that corridor.
Mark, it's my understanding that when we do the sidewalks and that sort of stuff, we need to do all the stormwater. We don't have stormwater up there,
Right,
do we?
bigger.
That's a bigger
So
issue.
it becomes a larger issue than just
Yeah.
filling some potholes.
Curb gutter sidewalk.
Curb gutter sidewalk generates collection conveyance for storm drainage, collection conveyance for storm drainage, then the domino tumbles to water quality quantity mitigation, which then tumbles to having to have a corridor and a downstream discharge point. So between a lot of short plats being developed in the area over the last 2-3 decades,
Really aware.
a lot of properties developing then under the no protest for frontage improvements. There is no real nexus or a starting point for any pedestrianized area. The last 2 residential projects that have come in, we've forced those developers to urbanize. The sidewalks, if you drive by them, are a bit silly. In the one case, they had to do sidewalks that were at grade because of the way that the roads were built. They couldn't do a raised sidewalk, and so we said, okay, you're going to do basically you're going to have a concrete strip that's at the same grade as the asphalt. It's the only thing that could be done based on the vertical elevations out there. And like I said, it's not what you want to do, but the problem that you have is you have these old streets, there's no drainage, we're requiring frontage improvements, and in this particular case with this particular builder, that's what we had to do. We're going to get sidewalks and fireweed, but again, there'll be just a little short section of sidewalks and then that's it.
Fireweed down Sydney at probably 100 feet. So the question is, what do we want for a response?
I think it's entirely appropriate that he respond on behalf of the city.
And he could say on behalf of the city council, because we can't respond individually, so.
Well, you could, it's just that you get
We better be
7
all saying
answers.
the same thing.
Yeah, you get 7 answers. So that's what I wanted to make sure that you were comfortable with, Mark. And I've just got a couple items and some bills that Brianna, so one.
I would just simply say, close this saying, that
Yes.
the council has asked me to respond to you on this.
Yeah. So we're looking into lighting. There's a big,
There's a bigger ULI, there's a local improvement district piece. This isn't just about paving roads and putting in sidewalks. There's a much larger regional plan that needs to fall into place. And the best example I can use is the city of Bremerton dealt with that East Bremerton by Rydell. There's an entire basin that they were trying to plan for strategically with drainage, and they were going to take a trunk line and come out of the Mosier Creek discharge area. And they put a lot of time and effort into this design, just like we would in this whole South Sydney area. And then Ecology, though, ultimately pushed back and said, we don't want a non-point discharge to Mosier Creek. They basically said, look, you need to use LID practices, and that whole thing has just not moved forward. And so my concern is that we're going to end up with the same thing, and the soils out there just are not conducive to big regional infiltration facilities. So it's a sticky wicket.
Along those same lines, though, I know a lot of jurisdictions in King County are providing matching funds if the neighborhood will form an LID for sidewalks, and they do green streets and programs like that. And so that's an option that can also, if the city council wanted to put to chip into something like that, if the neighbors were to take the initiative, they can always, form an LID and get some help from the city, and even potentially stormwater can participate if you're providing facilities for an existing road that doesn't have treatment. So that's something to consider.
And this is a TBD idea too, isn't it, funding for some of this?
Could be.
I mean, for the pavement.
Well,
and-
as a road project, you'd have the drainage component, yes. So if you said, we want you to improve curb gutter, sidewalk, bike lanes on Sydney, purchase the right-of-way, get the road designed, implement some sort of drainage for the road, that would all, it's just like Bethel, it's going to be the same process. The difference with Bethel is that there's already established through the county plan properties that we need to somehow convince the county to turn over to the city that were purchased for the purpose of regional storm drainage. And there's already a designed outfall into Blackjack Creek that you can get to down Salmonberry or down Lund. But yeah, it's a similar process. Drainage is really going to drive the design of the road plan.
Okay. Other just minor issues. Mr. Allen came in our public comment period last Tuesday night and pointed out that we don't have, he couldn't find it, our ADA coordinator. And we did some research, and we are required as a public entity to have an ADA coordinator. And I'm proud to announce that Deb Howard, our HR analyst, is now our ADA compliance coordinator.
Tell her congratulations
Yes.
for me.
I patted her on the back just the next day. We talked about the staff meeting, and we've got to see this one of the things that we've added is as a result of that is the sticker that tells that the hearing devices are available.
So she's familiar with the requirements?
We're working on that. She will be.
She has a teacher.
We just found out we had to have one. We have one now, and now we have to figure out what that means. So
we have a couple, so
and she is the coordinator, and then each department, what we believe each department will have an ADA person.
I'm just suggesting if she wants to reach out to one of our folks, we'd be happy to share knowledge.
Wonderful. Who would that point of contact be?
I would start with Ellen.
Okay. Done.
And in for what it's worth category, I know that the county also includes a little blurb at the bottom of their agenda. Is that in their notices that there's that availability should they want it?
Wonderful. Thank you.
We also have a resource for signing if the city ever needs someone to sign for one of their meetings. So
you guys are a wealth of information. I'm glad I brought this up. On bills, Brianna's been firing at me. There's House Bill 2348 that gives, remember we had the very dry summer last year and communities wanted to ban fireworks and they couldn't.
Not for a year.
Not for a year. So this bill would allow a city the authority to regulate and ban fireworks if necessary.
Now, wasn't there something going that the state was just going to do it for a year?
I haven't heard that. This is a bill that's been introduced to allow that.
Right, no, I understand that one, but I also heard along the whole line of fireworks that the state was, maybe it was the governor, was proposing to do a year-long ban, or there was a number of folks in Olympia that the state was just going to issue it, as opposed to each jurisdiction dealing with it.
I'm not knowledgeable of that, but are we in supportive of a?
Yeah.
Unless they're legal, safe, and sane fireworks.
Correct. Yes. Okay, so I will pass on to her. The other it was more of a question, and I got her the information. It's a Senate Bill 6115, and it seeks to limit sewer and water utility rate taxes at 6%. I know that some jurisdictions, we're at 5%. We have a B&O tax on the entire utility. We don't tax individual users. It's the way it's been as far as I know, as long as I've been around. And what happened during the economic downturn is many cities, have rates in excess of 10%, and raise them dramatically to help their general funds. And so that's what's going on there. What we heard at the PSRC meeting, I know Sean and Beck were there, that there isn't anything to allow us to assess. Our citizens pay that tax, but because we're the water and sewer provider, but we can't assess that to our neighbors or citizens that live in West Sound. And I think it's over in Wenatchee, I want to say, they've assessed it on another utility, and it's being challenged in court. I think a nice amendment would be to this would be to allow us.
Yeah, and clarify it.
And clarify it. So I mentioned that to her, and I just wanted to get concurrence on that. Any objections to that? And then I know I said I'd go to the SAC meeting tomorrow night, and then I got home and looked at my calendar and went, oops, I'm double booked. So I just want to hope the two of you are going to be here tomorrow night.
Well, I apologize for not getting back to you on your email that you sent out, but I'm wondering if it wouldn't be with late notice to cancel the SAC meeting until we've had an opportunity to do our committee assignments.
Okay.
I mean, unless there's something urgent other than signing minutes, I'm not aware of anything.
Well, it's approving minutes to sign minutes from July and October.
I'm available to sign those minutes. I just won't be available tomorrow evening.
But they can't be signed until they're approved.
Oh.
What's another month? July and October is pretty far.
What I saw on the agenda was just capital updates. Well, I sent the agenda out. It wasn't just capital updates and approval of minutes. Oh, then it was the Square property conversation. That whole convoluted mess of the different properties and the vacations and that map that Reed's working on. So
I would still suggest that, doesn't sound like there's anything timely, if we could just postpone until we've had an opportunity.
It's your call. It's your committee. I just know I can't.
the next meeting actually, and that was interesting that when West Sound published the next meeting date, it was actually 3 months out. It wasn't like every other month. It was January, instead of March, it was in April.
Maybe we need to set the committees and have a February meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, I will send an
Call
email.
tomorrow, and no, we're gonna have to reschedule.
Okay.
I'll take it off my calendar.
Okay, thank you. And then lastly, I just want to, I know that Myries is an issue, and I've been reaching out to Mansour. I've got a meeting scheduled in 2 weeks with him, so I was, as soon as I could get it on the calendar. He'd been out of town, and I've been in office 2 weeks, so I'm going to talk about that. It's a more complicated issue than it appears on the surface, and I'll
Ask him how he feels about murals. that may motivate him.
I'm not sure. I know we've got, one of the challenges is he's not interested in what the permit is for. Nick and I've had some conversation about
So
it.
we're not talking about the derelict building ordinance, we're talking about just that.
The physical property and moving forward with, something, and that's right. And
Can you say what it's permitted for, what it was permitted for?
he bought it on the courthouse steps.
Right.
The prior owner permitted apartments, and
He's not interested.
he's not interested in what that,
Right.
so to move forward with that, he doesn't want to move forward with that. So I think it's resolvable. We just got to sit down and talk about it, and in a couple weeks I'll be back to share more after I have a sit down with him.
Yeah, it's not board approval, so.
Could I bring up one issue we've talked about many times of trying to figure out a better way to reach out to our constituents on whatever things that we're proposing to do. And this is not necessarily a silver bullet by any means, but it's a piece that may take us one step closer. And I appreciate that not everyone in the city has access to email, but following on to something that Washington State Ferries currently does, and we implemented it in transit and it's been quite successful, is that we provide an opportunity for people, constituents, to sign up for electronic notices, and you kind of categorize what they would be interested in. In the case of transit, you can get interested in a specific route or a specific geographical area or everything. And you just build your email lists based on what their interest is. And in the city, when they have something that falls into one of those categories, they just send out one email to whomever's registered to get information on that. It's a fairly easy, simple thing to do, but it's just one other opportunity for folks to be.
Well, Gov Delivery.
I know that we have asked the council in the past for this type of service, and we actually were going to partner with the Kitsap County a few years back. We had a small presentation to the council, and it comes at a cost, and I can go reach out to them again and find out what the cost would be for that program. And I think Councilmember Chang is correct. What did you say it was? Gov Delivery.
That's what you guys are using.
No, we don't.
It's not,
No.
it's something else.
No, it's a fairly simple thing. You just build your email list with.
What about our new website? In developing our new website, what if it had the ability to
But
sign up for something by categories?
But I had been getting up until.
We have an email, we have an email agenda / city distribution list, and it's just a simple distribution list, but we don't have it sorted by category. Say, hey, if you're interested in, the current planning changes or the street improvements, or it's just we send out our agendas and any press releases, any notices, we just send it. It's not
What I
itemized.
suggested is exactly the same thing. It's just that somebody sits down and gives some thought to what are the potential areas of interest. And you just build your email lists for those interests, for those who expressed interest in those interests.
Do you have a contact person that I could seek some interest about getting that?
Lori Talbot.
Okay.
478-6225, I think.
Perfect. I'll give her a
Five
call.
doesn't work, 6 is.
No, I could go down the other way, but no, I'm almost positive it's 5. I guess I could look.
Anything else for the good of the order? All right.